Welcome everybody to today's webinar. You've all seen the title, Working with the 5 Seasons. Really pleased that Karyn's joined us. I've got a copy of her new book just here, which I of course would recommend. Before I introduce Karyn though, I just want to always just a bit of housekeeping for the next sort of 45 minutes or so. But just always, everybody's on listen only mode. So you can communicate with us on the chat panel. It'd be lovely to see reflections or any questions coming through as Karyn and I move into this conversation around the 5 seasons and you know, I suppose how this will support our practice as coaches. So please feel free to add any reflections or comments as we're going through today's session. Would always encourage people to close down all the other applications you may have open. Of course, this helps with focus and presence, but also it just ensures there's no impact on the broadcast speed. And the final thing is we will be recording this, so this will be available after the session for the people that have dialed in today. So we'll be appearing on our YouTube channel along with all the other sessions. So real joy to have Karyn here, and just to introduce Karyn for those who haven't had the pleasure of working with her. So Karyn's an executive coach and supervisor. For the people that have trained at Catalyst, they will recognize Karyn as one of the faculty and works on our advanced diploma modules. So really looking at areas such as creative methods and coaching outdoors on that program. Karyn's also the lead tutor on the Coaching Supervision Academy program and across a number of regions as well. So Karyn, I just suppose anything you want to say just at the start of this in terms of just connecting with the group? Or
just delighted to see you all and know that you know, we're all going through an unusual time, and that in fact one of the beneficiaries of this is actually nature itself finally going, they've got out of the skies and off the roads, thank God. So she gets a chance to regulate herself a bit better, which helps us.
So Karyn, we're here to talk about working with the 5 seasons, and I'm just holding your book up again, but can we start with you? And just the question, I think people would be interested about what's brought you to this work.
Well, I think what's brought me in a way full circle, if I think about it, is whenever I've had difficulties, I know that in any sort of, say, in relationships, in my life, with my family, is I find that getting outdoors helps me to regulate myself. I mean, apart from the obvious benefits of breathing fresh air and moving the body and getting moving, that I found I could get things more into proportion if I was outside and connected to my inner nature to outer nature, so that there was a kind of rebalancing on my own ecology, which I think has become more and more a topic of conversation, not just with my book, but the whole notion of vitamin N, that we need a dose of being outside for our mental and physical well-being. And what I found was, well, if that walking and talking works for me, I wonder if it would work for somebody else. We're so used to working with our clients indoors in boxes. So I started exploring with, say, well, can we do the last half an hour while you're thinking through what we've been talking about? Shall we go out and walk it? And I never had anyone that said no. Oh, no. It was more like, what do I do with my stuff, or where I have to get a coat and all of that. But nobody said no. And then a few more years passed, and a colleague of mine and I said, well, let's test this out. And we decided to offer 1 hour between 1 and 2 p.m. the first Wednesday of every month for free in Green Park. And the therapists, counselors, coaches, supervisors could turn up, and we would walk in Green Park and provide different kinds of exercises and a place to walk and talk. And I can actually say we did that for 18 months, and 16 of the 18 months, the session, there was never any rain. You know, the notion that in London and England it rains a lot. We were only rained on once of the remaining 2 times, and one where it threatened. So we had good weather for all that, but we had people coming back and saying how useful it was. And we also found we were connecting to Green Park and the change of seasons. It's not a big park. And after that and some more work, my colleague and I, Elaine, said, let's do a supervision group and do one for each of the seasons, because each season, as I guess we'll talk about, has a different flavor, a different energy, and is part of a full holistic cycle, whether we go through it in a day, in a calendar year, or in a shorter amount of time. And so it's really gone on from that to we're now in year 6 of one of the groups, and we have a second group. We've just started one, well, we will do once we can go there, in Brussels, in the forest outside of Brussels. So those people in those groups have started doing it as well. So it's exponentially grown in the research that's now coming out more and more, of which there is loads, in psychotherapy, in biophilia, in ways in which that in Shinrin-yoku, forest bathing, that, you know, what actually we intuitively already know, going outside for a good walk is good. So that's it.
No, thank you.
Go outside is the message.
And we did, I know Fee works with us, and I did do another webinar with Fee around this whole notion of coaching outdoors. And and again, it's just based on your experience so far, Karyn, what would you say the key learning is for you as a practitioner, just in terms of working this way?
Trust, because certainly in the supervision group and with coaching clients too, I let nature be much more the co-partner in this, the inspiration for the work, which means less is more, a lighter touch, a deeper connection to what is in the present moment. So it's a very mindful practice, because you can't make a tree be anything other than the tree it is, or the plant move any faster than the plant moves. So it gives us a chance of the power of pause, which I know, very key to Catalyst, very key to being here now. Somebody said to me in a session earlier today, what concerns do you have that you have control over? And so it's made me think about that more.
So thinking about nature, and you've mentioned the seasons. So in your book Nature's Way, where you explore the 5 seasons. So how does attention to the seasons, bringing in another sort of aspect of working with nature, help us in the work that we do, Karyn?
So I've got I think I sent you 2 slides, and one of the slides shows the cycle. And before we put it up, the 2 major things here. One is talking about going outside and the huge benefits of being outdoors in the individual seasons, or even in the same place, and noting the season. But actually, this stuff is so powerful, you don't have to go outside to make it a useful exploration. I'll explain in a minute how that could be so. But the cycle itself allows us, as a metaphor, to attend to what we need to do, whatever that may be in the largest sense, and therefore is applicable wherever we are. So the seasons actually have a model of a metaphor and a model to help us think through something, a concern, a situation where we are.
So would it be useful to show the cycle?
If you could pop this slide up, and I can give the sense of what that means, and we can look at the seasons separately in a minute. So the other one, that one, cycle of the 5 seasons. So if you can see this, it's the small print here. If we're looking at these as 5 stages of a cycle, and you probably could look at other models and think, oh, I could map this onto a different model. But if we start in spring, which is where we are, we're in late spring now, and if you've got gardens or you go for a walk in somebody else's, you'll know that things are just in and you live in this hemisphere. If you live in another hemisphere, of course, you'll have a different story. But in the spring energy, now we're seeing right from when those little first snowdrops appeared in your garden or in the park, that this is hope over despair, that the energy is coming up through the ground of winter. It's coming up. We're seeing green shoots, and one plant, one flower, one tree after the other. The qualities around spring are about growth, about seeding and sowing and planting and growing, and the trajectory is upwards and outwards. So in terms of when we work, this is like new projects starting, new ideas. Sometimes we have lots of ideas all at once, and the energy can be dissipated because we don't know where to put our own energy. And you may also find now as some sense of lockdown is beginning to shake and move a bit, that people are they want to get out there. The beaches were unfortunately full of people because there's this push to go out and to be out there. And there's also new relationships and new partnerships. So the whole sense around newness and possibility are out there. So in an organization, we can see that. We can see how in a way we've been held back from that, wanting to go out there because of the current pandemic situation. The energy is to thrust forward. So we can have lots of little tender shoots. And those tender shoots, a lot of times, need to be protected. My husband's been taking all the little tiny plants out in the morning and putting them on a table and then bringing them back into the conservatory in the evening. Because certainly in England, the old saying is, don't cast a cloud till May is out. In other words, there could still be frost. So just like projects we have at work, we have to look after the tender shoots. A lot of people have said they've started new greening of their own lives by having to be at home, walking more, doing yoga, doing whatever they need. And I've heard so many people say, I don't want to lose this. This is a new practice. I don't want to lose it. So these are like the tender shoots that require us to look after them and greenhouse them until they're strong enough that in neuroscience, we know the neural pathway is created. If we're talking about a new idea, so that it's strong enough to stand on its own. So there's all that energy there about going out there. And we can see it around us now in this hemisphere. So if we then think about how that moves on to summer, so by the time we get to summer, this is about things really being juicy, passionately in fruit. We're starting to see strawberries and raspberries and roses. And so in a business sense, this is when ideas come to fruition, when we're starting to see projects coming near completion, when we're seeing the time for celebrating, whether it's a barbecue together in normal times rather than pandemic times, excuse me. So summer is about passion, it's paganism, yes, thank you, Paul. It's celebration, it's community, it's bigness, it's juiciness, it's passion. Fireworks. In whatever way we might want to apply that in or out of work. And then the next season, which is the one that's often missing in business, and I think often for us individually, I think Catalyst often stands for, and Damion really brings us out in the work with the mindfulness, is late summer is that period about the middle of August to about the middle of September if we're looking at a calendar. And it's about savoring, and it's about harvesting. It's about clarifying what is. So here's my skills, taking stock. This is what I do well. This is my abundance. And I find as a coach, quite often a client will come ready to look at what's missing, what they're not doing, what they need more of, one more tool they need, one more program they need to go on. And sometimes miss a beat about what is already here now. What can we appreciate? What can we harvest from all that work from spring and summer? What can really we hold on to that can nourish us, that we can see and take stock of, so that we're appreciating it? And so often in businesses, we go from new idea to project, finish, start another one. Oh, well done. Oh, let's start another thing. Oh, it's finished. Well done. Not so good. and we move on, and we don't take sufficient amount of time to savor, which means we have to pause. We have to feel some sense of, this too, which I'm sure with your clients as a coach, you can recognize, because clients too, their own companies don't often take enough time to say, not just well done, but let's take time to really look at what you've done and what you have. That's good. So I'm going to stop right there before I take some questions, I'm going to ask you just to take a moment for your own pause to think, what is new and I might want to plant? And what is already there that I need to really look after and savor and appreciate? What is new? What's a small shoot? What is there that I already have that I may celebrate? So we're going to take those 3 seasons just for a moment, pause to look at as one, although they are 3 very distinct parts of a cycle, as I'm sure you could recognize it. Yes, thank you, Tracy. It is like a moment of Sabbath, a Sabbath moment. Whatever your religion, doesn't really matter. It's a moment to pause. So I'm just going to give a moment there and stop talking and allow you just to reflect on that. New shoots, what's a possibility? What's a new thing you want to seed? And what's already there that you can appreciate right now?
And as Mike, so I was just going to say, as Mike's doing there, perhaps if anyone is happy to share any reflections, it'd be lovely to see some thoughts coming through.
Yeah, we'll just take a little pause, and then we'll ask a couple of questions before we go on, but just giving some space for that to just be for the moment. Okay, so what, any other thoughts coming up? Easy to see what's emergent. Yes, it is harder to see what's there. And that's why this 5th season is so important for us, for our clients, for organizations to see, not what's missing, but what's there. Lovely, well put. Any other questions so far? Yes, indeed. What new ventures, what new possibilities, what new partnerships? Or what ones need refreshing? That's a really interesting question. I'll come back to that. The idea of when we're out of sync. In a way, I think the world has been out of sync. We were forced back into hibernation of winter. We were told to kind of get back underground. And yet we could look out the window, certainly in this hemisphere, and see the green shoots of spring. And I think that throws us out. So in coaching, I might say, what season do you feel like you're in? Which is interesting to see where someone starts. Or I might say, which season, if we were drawn to look at this question that you brought, which one would you be drawn to? But I do use my seasons cards if I'm indoors, different pictures of each seasons with questions to help. But so I might ask, because if they're out of sync, that alone is some data for us to look at. An organization may be thrusting forward with new things, and we may still be in autumn because all around us people have been made redundant. They've been pruned out of the company. So that out of syncness is important because it's data, and it gives us a language to be exploring this. Do we need to be in or out of sync with ourselves? Yes, but we may be in or out of sync with an organization, which may tell us something else about our relationship to that organization. Absolutely, we don't do enough of this in business. We shoot past this all the time. We don't savor. I think in the Western world, making a massive statement here, we do not savor. We eat fast, we do 100 things at once. We don't savor. And mindfulness is a beautiful route into savoring, because if not now, when? So let's just move on and we'll look at this, look at it as a whole. If we think about moving on from late summer into autumn, this is taking heart because there's a late harvest, thinking about wine. It's harvested more in October. Some things are harvested in August and September. But autumn is about gratitude. It also has an aspect of loss, because now, from the end of late summer in the world of nature, the sap is starting to go down into the roots. So plants and trees particularly, are looking down to feed back, to get their nourishment down back into the ground to be ready for the following spring. And in autumn, we plant bulbs that we hope will come up in the spring in the garden, and we start to prune. So in the working world, also, we can become cluttered by this time, overgrown with half-done projects, things we meant to do, in trays that are full of brochures for things that you're never going to do. So autumn's about thinking about clarifying what needs to stay, what needs to go, because in a garden needs the space to grow in. As humans, we need the space to grow in. So decluttering and pruning with care is important. Now, the element that's most associated with autumn is metal. So we think of metal, we've got metal in us. We have elemental minerals and metals in us as humans. Metal can be molten and melted into the most beautiful chalice. It can be made into beautiful jewelry. It can be made into a sword. So metal has lots of different aspects, but even the sword, for judiciously cutting through what is needed to be cut. What must stay? What must I let go? What must I let go in order for my garden, my business, my life to flourish? Hard choices. And sometimes those are about losses that are sad because they're bereavement and ends. And ending is part of a coaching assignment and hard for some clients. Ending in life, we've been facing 34,000 losses of life in this country. How will we deal with that? I think there's a new book being opened called Remember Me. It was on the news this morning. To remember people we haven't been able to properly say goodbye to. But endings are important to be honored, to bring the gratitude in, to be with it and not race past it as a part of this cycle until we come round to winter. Now it's interesting because winter is often the one that is missing from organizational life too, which is the stop, reflect, and take the silence and spiritual connection, whatever that may mean to us, to go, ah, yes, refuel, restore, connect back into our deepest part of ourselves. In organizations, in December, what happens? Christmas parties. We know that Christmas is a really stressful time because people up the amount of activity just when they need to rest, just when they need to come home to themselves, and be at that place of renewal. We look around outside, it looks like nothing's happening in the garden, but so much is, but it's underground because winter's about germination. So our reading, our inspiration, the things that fuel us and feed us and take us deep, so that we come back around to the top of the cycle, that little shoot comes up and we're off again. So each one of these parts of the cycle is so important. And sometimes when there's problems and concerns and malaise, it's because something's missing in this cycle. So some of our work is to say, what do you need more of? Are you getting enough summer, juicy, celebration? Are you taking time to reflect and come home to yourself? Are you savoring really what is? So that's the cycle. But I go through that in a day. I wake up, I have great plans. I'm going to do some meditation. I'm going to go out for a walk. I've got lots of things. And then all of a sudden it's midday and I'm going, wow, I've done that, not done that. Yes, okay, let's celebrate that. Let's not quite a glass of rosé time, but okay, what's the day looking like now? Let me take some time, think about what the day has been like. And then I've got to think about what, making space, what will tomorrow be like? Take a little time to gather my energy in before I start again. So we do it in a day, we do it in a year, we do it in a project. The cycle of the seasons as a metaphor for conversation, courageous, creative conversations. Yes, wonderful. Yes. 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 Where is your relationship now if you were looking at this season? And are you both in the same season? Wonderful questions. You're getting really creative with this. I love it. You could create questions for each of these seasons and feel into it with the joy that each one of those seasons bring. And what people do say to me is they get reacquainted and a new intimacy with each one of those seasons. So if we map that to a walk in your favorite park, what would you notice differently in each one of those seasons? It becomes really exciting. I feel like I've been talking a lot. So let's open this up, Damion. Can we do that?
Well, we can see some questions, reflections coming through on the chat panel.
Mm-hmm.
So again, if there are other questions you want to ask Karyn at this point. I'm also noticing, Cam, I'm really curious about the other diagram as well in terms of the cycle.
Oh, yes. Okay. Do you want to show that then? Right. This diagram comes from the book, and I put it in because it's kind of like, look at the seasons in a nutshell to get a sense of their differentiation. And then each of the 5 chapters in the book looks at each one of these pie slices. So I'll give you a chance to look at it. And if you read up from the middle outwards, what you've got is the element, in the Chinese medicine of 5 seasons, the element that most associates with the season. So if I look at green for spring, we've got wood and the new wood of spring. The next one is the contraindication. In other words, when spring gets away with itself, we lose our patience and we can get angry. So it's the shadow side of it. So we need to be aware of patience is still part. We can't make something grow faster, even with rooting power, than it will do. But the energy around it is awaken. The shadow is anger. A sense of the gift it brings is around creativity in all sorts of ways and fresh possibilities. And the thrust there is out towards growth and setting clear goals and seeing where we're going. So we're moving right out there is our intention. And so you can read each one of those. For summer is the red and so on. So give you a chance just to look at that. And as experienced coaches, I bet you could already make a list of some great questions. In fact, if you can do that, we'd love to have you offer one up. What would be a great question for spring or winter or autumn or late summer? And what's your favorite season? Explain the shadow element. Yes, I'll do that in a moment. Yep. Yes, it will map to other models. So the shadow side is interesting, especially with, if we think, even if the southern hemisphere going into autumn now, while we're heading into summer, or thinking of Jung's map of the psyche, not everything is in light all the time. All of us, everything alive casts a shadow, and so do we. And so we're owning that spring isn't just about only the new stuff. It also carries that unless we take care, there are other feelings that are there too. And so when we push too fast, we go too hard, we can excite a shadow aspect in ourselves. Anger is one. Rushing, not seeing the full picture. So we're just noticing here that all of this isn't just about what is in the light. Everything carries a shadow, and to think about that. And that it's the counterbalance of light and dark of life itself. As sadness can be the counterbalance of joy, that there is also sadness there, or worry for late summer. So savoring, if we take savoring to another extreme, we can worry over something, we can fuss over something, which is different energy than going, this is really good, and this is my abundance, and this is what I have. So it's just being aware that we're holding the notion of wholeness by recognizing there is light and there is shadow. Hope that helped.
Yeah, I can see Shriti's just put a comment on there as well. Anger feels like a very strong shadow for spring. What does anger really mean, which you sort of spoke to? Is it impatience?
I think it's a spectrum. For some people, it will be impatience. For some, it will the over eagerness to get going can seem pushy. At one end of the spectrum, it could be, come on, let's go. What's the matter? I want to get out there. I want to go to the park. I want to go to the beach. What's the matter? Why aren't we giving up this stuff about self-confinement? So think of it really as a band or a spectrum. But with our clients, we can see how it speaks to them. So there isn't a single definition to any of these. If we think of autumn and loss being part of this, sometimes people don't want to talk about loss. But the end of the year is about loss. And, the autumn of life is about loss. Or as a culture, we don't like to go there and talk about that. And yet now, in this pandemic, we've been thrust into it. So think of it as a spectrum that allows us in our humanness to accept it all and to explore it with compassion.
If anyone else has any other questions or reflections, just please add them to the chat panel.
I think that all of you know this in your heart of hearts, because I think we hold this cycle in us, whether we live in the north or the south, in terms of hemisphere, or the east or the west. I've had a number of people come on a retreat from Brazil, where they only have wet and less wet as South America in terms of seasons, but they have a notional literary sense of season because they read. And so they read about books that are placed in the Arctic or the Antarctic or the depth of winter. So they have a story sense of what winter may mean, even if they don't experience winter in the way we might do, say, here in this country. So it gives you lots of room to be creative and to meander in a way that's very juicy.
And because you're sort of leaning into this piece then, Karyn, how about, at the moment we are more restricted. I know now we could potentially meet up with 2 meter distance, and in the UK, other countries are in different places, but what are your thoughts around how do we sort of work with nature when we're potentially working online, like this?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's funny you should say that, because I just did an outdoor supervision group online this week because we couldn't meet. So there's a couple of ways you can do this. One is, and this is not necessarily, I'm trying to sell my cards, but I do have these cards. So one way is you just create some images of the 5 seasons, which are fun to do anyway. You could lay them, you could send them as a PowerPoint to somebody and say, look at these slides. Which one draws your attention? Why? To begin a conversation, that's one thing. You can show them several slides for each season and say, if you were thinking about the question that you're bringing today, where shall we start? Well, I'm drawn to autumn, I don't know why. And so it would require you to know a little bit about what that might mean. I mean, the book is really good for that, to say what the qualities and the essence are of that. Or you can say, okay, tell me about what autumns are like for you. And you get them to talk through their experience of autumn. And you might even, hear them speak and say, that's really interesting when I hear you speak. Use of self here now in coaching. For me, autumn is also about, does that resonate with you? And so you can explore how might autumn show up? So autumn in a question might be about, what do you need to declutter here? What do you need to let go of? What do you need to clarify here that's really important in the question that you're bringing? What's the priority here and what's here? So your questions are geared, and you start where your client wants to start. Or you might take them through the year. So you take them through, can we take this question and look at, let's say we start in autumn. This is what needs to be cut away. Okay, so if we're looking at that, thinking about moving on to winter, and you might pick an image, or you might ask them to talk about winter. Winter is about what you need to reflect on here. If you take a pause and sit with that for a moment, we just hold that in quietness here. What would your wisest self say? What would you get your inspiration from for this question? So your questions would take them to the essence of feeling around that cycle I just showed you, but in a gentle exploration of questions that evoke that season, which you might have already thought about before. If you're going to use this, I can do it on the hop because it's in me, it's in my DNA, but you'll be able to develop your own way to use that going around the cycle. What's the season that draws you the least? They say, well, late summer doesn't speak to me. I don't know anything about that. You say, well, it's interesting. That's about savoring and harvesting what is. How well do you do that? How well does your team do that? Most people say, yeah, I probably could do a little more of that. And there you have a fruitful conversation. So that's one way that you can be creative with that without going outdoors. A short way is say, I'd like you to look out the window and talk to me about what you see. And is there anything that inspires you out your window? And if it's a brick wall, that would be interesting conversation too. It's happened to me. If you have good broadband, and I have this from a colleague on the call, they each one went out and walked. Wi-Fi. And the client talked about the environment they were walking in, and they walked as well. It's another way. You always get the benefit of good connection, depends on where you are, but iffy. And the last methodology is based on the second part of the book, which is not the seasons, but I use this a lot. We used it this week. And I say to someone, I'd like you to think about your professional life as a garden. And on a blank piece of paper, draw a shape that represents what your professional life looks like. Or if it's a life garden, you could do that too. Both is probably possible too. And then I go through things like, so what are the things in your garden that your work life now that are rooted and strong and you wouldn't want them to leave? It could be a relationship, could be an ongoing associateship, it could be a client that's been there for years and years and years. And represent those on your paper. Could be a hedge, could be an oak tree. It's something that can't be moved or you don't want it to be moved. And then we'll use the language which is in the book. We'll say, okay, so what are the projects that are short-term, burst of color? How many of those have you got in your garden? And represent those. And then we stop and say, what space have you got left in your professional garden now? What else do you need? Where's the place for rest? Put that in. Have you got a path that leads between these places? What's the view like from the garden, your professional life? What are you noticing? Where are you in this garden? What's big, what's small? What needs to go? How much weeds have you got there? So we're using this language. Have you got a greenhouse for those new ideas? They need a shed, because that's where you put your tools and techniques, programs you're going on, the way you resource yourself to look after your garden. They draw and then they talk. Or we start from scratch, or they start with a full garden that they bring, and then we go, okay, if you're going to redesign your garden, now what's it going to look like? Crayons and paper, no matter how big, important, senior, crowns, stars, they love to draw. And because they're drawing in the safety and security of their own office, it doesn't matter what it looks like, and you don't have to see it.
Yeah, wonderful, Karyn. And just on that point, just say Karyn did run another webinar with us on creative methods. So that is available on the YouTube channel if you're interested in using more approaches like drawing, etc., in your coaching or supervision work, etc. Karyn, you've been so generous. So I think
I'm going to show you this very briefly. I know it's hard to see. This was one of the gardens someone drew about their work garden.
Wow.
20 minutes that took.
Wow. Wow. And as I was saying, I mean, I appreciate how generous you've been this morning in terms of what you've shared. There's been lots of questions from people about how to get a copy of your book, how to get a copy of your cards. So perhaps if you could just mention that.
The book you can get from Amazon. I think Waterstones do it online as well. The cards you can get from me. So all you need to do is email me and I can send them out. They're £20 plus the postage, and you get 4 methods that you can use the cards with, and so that you're not starting from scratch.
Thank you, Karyn. Just anything you want to say just to close this down for your side, Karyn, with the group?
Well, it's funny. It's probably what I said at the beginning. Go outside. When you finish this call, wherever you are, just go outside and think, gosh, here's your new business partner. And enjoy wherever you are, because this is so rich and so nourishing. And send stories back, any stories that you have of where you've been and used this. I would love to hear from you.
Thank you. Thank you. And thanks to everyone for joining the session. Really hope it's added additional reflection for your practice as a coach, and just the invitation that the current time is offering us as well.
I just saw someone say only 5 copies left on Amazon. I think that's probably because of lockdown. But if they send to me, I will send it out, and I can send it out from here. And the price will include the postage, so you won't be paying more for it than you would have done on Amazon. So just email me, because I've got about 30 copies here.
What we'll do after the session is just send your email address around, Karyn, just so everybody has them. Yeah, wonderful. So I hope you can join us for the next session. It does actually link. We'll be doing another session with Fee McMillan, and we're really looking at how working outdoors as a coach really invites more of a systemic perspective with the client. So we'll really build on the session today. That will be in June. Look forward to seeing you on that one then. Thanks again, Karyn.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Bye.